Hello and welcome back to Parc Fermé Parlay with Kieran Downey. Oh my god, what a Grand Prix that was. That was chaos, carnage, thrilling to say the least. When Vegas joined the calendar last year, I didn't have many hopes for it, but we've actually had two pretty decent races from it now. So long may that continue. And we're obviously here to recap the race that's just happened. But I think it's only fair that we are dressed appropriately. And when I say that, I only have one change. And I think it's only appropriate that we stick a Red Bull hat on, because this day belongs to one man. I mean, it actually belongs to two, because obviously we have the race winner, but we have a new champion, and very well deserved champion it is. I am very excited. Obviously, we'll come on to talk about Max. I mean, it was hardly going to be Checo, was it? We'll come on and talk about Max later. We've got quite a bit to discuss, but what a year it's been. What a year. And we've obviously got two races left. Very excited for them. And just brilliant from Max, to be honest. Absolutely brilliant. But as I said, we'll come on to him shortly. Let's dive right in with our first driver. And that is Kevin Magnussen, who qualified 12th, finished 12th. Magnussen was one of these drivers who, for the majority of the Grand Prix, was just kind of running his own little race. Like, he wasn't really doing much. He had a little bit of a skirmish with Liam Lawson at the very start, and how neither of the two of them ended up in the barrier is beyond me, because that was close. They were coming down the back straight, the strip, and were basically too wide going through turns 14, 15 and 16. And that's a tight corner. I mean, that's where Franco Colapinto crashed yesterday in qualifying. They got through fine. They got through absolutely fine. How? I have no idea. Magnussen came over the radio complaining about Lawson. It was obviously, he felt quite a dangerous move. It did get referred to the stewards, no further action. But honestly, how both of them got out of that unscathed is absolutely beyond me. And then apart from that, you never really seen him on the broadcast. He was just kind of in his own little world for most of it. I didn't see him doing much, to be honest with you. His teammate had a bit of a better race. Nico Hülkenberg qualified 9th, finished 8th. Great result from Haas again, and from Hülkenberg to be getting points. I am just loving Haas getting points. Really, really loving it. The bounce back this year has been incredible, and Ayo Komatsu seems to be a very switched on team principal. He seems to be taking the team in the right direction. And I know we were all a bit upset with Gunther leaving. Again, I feel like that was maybe just more of he was a character, whereas Ayu seems to be very switched on, knows what he's doing, knows what he's talking about, and just is playing an absolute... He's doing brilliant things with that team, and it's reflected in the drivers' results. I mean, last year they were pretty much plumb last nearly every race. This year they're scoring points pretty consistently. So well done to Hülkenberg for getting P8. I'm very interested to see where Haas will finish in the Constructors. They're currently on 50 points. They are 36 behind Aston Martin, who for another week this year, both drivers haven't scored points. So if they can even get Magnussen into points and have double points scoring, there is a chance that within the next two races they could catch up and overtake Aston Martin for 5th in the championship. It's a lot to achieve, 36 points in those two races. It requires a good position for both the drivers, but it's doable. It is doable. So watching that very, very closely. Moving on to the Sauber boys. And what an interesting weekend they've had. Zhou Guanyu qualified 13th, finished 13th. And Valtteri Bottas qualified 19th, finished 18th. Valtteri Bottas' race is one that I expect from Sauber. Qualify at the back of the grid, finish pretty much at the back of the grid. He did, he finished last actually, because we had 2 DNFs. He should have started 20th, but he actually got promoted up a place because Franco Colapinto had to start from the pit lane. And I thought he was in the fight at one point. I genuinely did. And it all just kind of fell away. It all just, at one point, him and Zhou Guanyu were running pretty nicely up close to the points. And then I think I blinked and he'd obviously pitted and just never managed to really recover. Zhou Guanyu, however, I honestly think that man would be scoring consistent points if every race was about 10 degrees temperature. Genuinely. That track should be made for the Cyber. We know its pitfalls being the hard braking zones and the fast corners, but on the straights they were pretty decent. And at one point Zhou Guanyu was running in the points and I was like, is this the day that, like, if you had asked me, if Cyber were to score points, who would be the one scoring points? And I would say Bottas, without a doubt. But then this weekend, Zhou Guanyu's been running all right, to be fair, has been running all right. The best qualifying we've seen for a while. Not the best finishing position. He obviously finished 11th in Bahrain, but I mean, it's nice to see something from them. I mean, we've only got 2 races left with them, and then they're gone. It's very clear that Bottas is not returning to the sport. He's doing this whole what next social media campaign. He's doing triathlons in his house. Like I think he's ready to move on. Zhou Guanyu, there's talks of him maybe taking a reserve driver role at Ferrari or some sort of testing driver, sim driver, something like that. So he could be staying within the sport, but it's just a shame that both of the boys have been handed an absolute dustbin this year. And I went into this race thinking maybe they could get points. And I've fully 180'd on that, and I am back to they will finish this year on 0 points. Because the next 2 tracks I don't think are going to suit that car at all. And I think it would take some form of a miracle to get them a point, to be completely honest. So another weekend with 0 points. 2 more races. Will they get a point? I don't think so. I don't think so. Next up is Liam Lawson, who qualified 15th, started 14th, finished 16th. Now, as I said, he obviously had that very tight skirmish with Magnussen. As I'll say it again, very surprised neither of them took any damage or hit the barrier. I think their cars had a bit of a collision. I'd say collision. It was like a love tap, but I think there was definitely something. He was noted for leaving the track and gaining an advantage, but it got dismissed by the stewards, no further action. And then just never really got back into the fight. He was always just kind of running in the mid-teens sort of positions, your sort of 15, 16 sort of positions, and just never really made an impact. So I've not really got much to say. I will say that, and he has said himself, he was like, these conditions that we're driving in, I'm only used to in winter testing. Like, I'm not used to being competitive in this kind of environment where it's so cold and the tracks, there's no track temp and all that kind of stuff. So it is new to him. It's different for him. And I mean, could you say well done for finishing the race in those kind of conditions? Maybe, when you're not used to it, but just was never really in the fight. His teammate, however, was kind of a little bit, not much. Yuki Tsunoda qualified 7th, finished 9th. Yuki spent the majority of the race just kind of running in the back of the points positions. Well done to score a couple of points. It is sort of crunch time for these teams. They do need to be scoring points because it is so close between Haas, Alpine and RB. I actually have just remembered that Haas have now overtaken, I'm just looking at the Constructors' Championship. Haas have actually overtaken Alpine in the Constructors. They are now 1 point ahead of them. RB are sitting 3 behind Alpine. And all of these teams are going to need their drivers to sort of be scoring points in the next 2 races because that is still all to play for, and there is a huge difference in money depending on where they finish in the championship. So it would be good to get both of them. I don't feel that Lawson would have scored points this weekend. Great that Yuki scored points. There was actually, all within the space of about 5 minutes, a lot of drama going on in the pit lane, and Yuki Tsunoda was part of it. He came into the pits, and then when he was leaving the pit lane, just I think, well, I don't know whether he was looking in his mirrors, I don't know what he was doing, but he just went straight over the sign for the speed limiter, the sign that sort of tells the drivers they can go back to racing speed. He just went clean through it. And he said himself in his post-race chats with F1 TV, he was like, I shit my pants. Because obviously he wasn't paying attention, and then next thing he was running over a bit of signage. Apart from that, another driver you didn't really see. A lot of these drivers you didn't see. I think there was so much battling going on at the front of the pack that you didn't really manage to see a lot of the other drivers. But good result from Yuki, another couple of points in the bag. He is running pretty consistently, and he was asked about what he feels in terms of the Red Bull seat, and you know, should he be considered, and what's his feelings on it. And he was like, I should be considered for this seat, and I couldn't agree more. That man has put in so much work to get promoted and get out of a junior team, because the V-Carb is a junior team. He's still scoring points consistently in it, but it is a junior team. He wants to be in the top teams, and I do think he is earning his chance. I genuinely think Red Bull should be giving him the chance, but oh God, who knows with this team whether or not Perez is getting dumped. We'll come and speak to him about him in a minute. Next up, Alex Albon, who qualified 18th, started 17th, did not finish. Man, Williams, it's just all gone tits up for them, hasn't it? It really has all just gone. They've really 180'd in this past 2 weeks actually, because they didn't have a great time in Brazil, did they? And now this. I honestly felt so bad for him. He was coming over the radio. He wasn't that happy with the car, and he was saying he was experiencing something that wasn't quite right, and then he had to retire the car. There was an engine problem, and I do feel bad for him that, you know, he's gotten a taste of scoring some points, and then it's just kind of ripped away, and through no fault of his own. And you know, reliability on the cars has been so great recently. It's quite an odd thing to see cars retiring due to reliability issues. Pierre Gasly being another one, obviously. And I feel bad for him. I do feel bad for him. And you've got to wonder what will happen next year with Williams, because James Vowles is openly saying, like, I don't care about 23. I don't care about 24. I don't really care about 25. He is playing a long game, and I do believe he's making the right decisions. But for the drivers that are so ready to be winning here and now, I feel bad for him that he's had to retire from the race. His teammate didn't have a particularly great race either. Franco Colapinto qualified 14th, started from the pit lane, finished 14th. Did a good job to work his way through the pack. Again, was never fully in the fight for points, was always just kind of on the fringes or towards the back of the pack. I don't really have anything to say about Colapinto. Again, I think it is just an inexperience of being in these conditions, and also the man must still be feeling a bit wounded. He crashed yesterday with about 50 G of force. Now, when Max Verstappen crashed in Silverstone in 2021, that was 51 G of force, and Max has come out and said he was wounded from it. So he must still be feeling some kind of pain in and around his body. So to go and complete, you know, finish the Grand Prix on a very tricky circuit for your first time, well done, Colapinto, to be fair. Well done. All right, moving on to another team that didn't have a great weekend. We'll start with Esteban Ocon, who qualified 11th, finished 17th. Man, Ocon's race was just kind of ruined with that pit stop, wasn't it? Really ruined with that pit stop. I don't know whether, like, was he actually called in? Because I never seen the box message or anything like that, but the camera just kind of changed him, and he was going into the pits. In fact, we didn't even see it live. It was a replay. He went into the pits, and you can see from the onboard that there's only one member of the pit crew stood outside the garage. No other mechanic was there ready to take him into the pits. So he had to, at first it was reported that he just kind of missed his pit box and just had to keep going. Not the case. There was nobody ready for him. He couldn't actually pit. So he had to do another lap around and pit again, and it just ruined it for him. It really ruined it for him, and I do feel quite bad. Like, what was going on down at Alpine? This is part of that, like, mess in the pits. It spanned like 5 minutes. The other one was Lance Stroll. We'll come on to him in a second. But yeah, not great from Alpine. I don't know what was going on there. His teammate was our other retiree, Pierre Gasly. Oh, I feel so bad for him. Qualified third, DNF'd. Pierre had a poor start to the race, to be honest. He was too busy focused on something and kind of left the inside open and lost positions to Charles Leclerc. And then was kind of, I don't think he really put up much of a fight for Max to get through. And then came over the radio not that long after and had said that he was losing power. He felt like he was losing power, and they came back and they were like, "No, we're all grand. Like, we can see on the data that everything's fine on the sensors." And then next thing, there was just smoke coming out the back of his car, and it was done. Car got retired. He was out the race, and I felt so bad for him because it was just all looking great for him. He was going to finish in the points. He may not have been on the podium, but he was going to finish in the points. I have no doubt about it. He was running pretty all right up until his engine went, and it was race over for Pierre Gasly. I feel really bad for him, and the high of both of them being on a podium last week to now a silly mistake in the pit stops and an engine failure. I feel really bad for the team, and I feel really bad for both the drivers. But the team is 3 points ahead of RB. They're 1 point behind Haas. That battle for 6th, potentially 5th, is one of my focuses in the remaining 2 races, because I think that will be tight, and all 3 of those teams are very capable of scoring points, both those drivers scoring points, and it'll be interesting to see what happens. We've obviously got a sprint in Qatar as well, so there is some points up for grabs there. Definitely a fight that you should be watching is that potentially that fight for 5th, but the 6th is all to play for. Another team that just didn't really have much to offer this weekend is Aston Martin, with Fernando Alonso, who qualified 17th, started 16th, finished 11th, and Lance Stroll, who qualified 20th, started 18th, finished 15th. I generally don't have anything to say about them. They were not showing. They were nowhere to be seen. They ran outside of the points for the majority of the race. If they were in the points, they were on the fringes, and then it was only because they hadn't pitted yet. It was just a poor weekend for Aston Martin all round. Lance Stroll being the other one that was in that sort of mad moment in the pits. He pitted as well, and he stopped in the pits, and the team just wasn't ready. They didn't have the tyres ready. They just were not ready for that pit stop, and it's just a rookie mistake, especially from a team like Aston Martin. In fact, for any Formula One team to be making that mistake, it's just a bit ridiculous. Could Lance Stroll have gotten a point? Nah, I don't think so. I really don't think so. I don't think either of them could have, to be honest. Alonso was just on the cusp of points. Perez just being a slightly better driver. And I would say that finishing ahead of Alonso is the only merit that Perez will have from this. As I said, we'll come on to him in a second. But just a pretty poor performance for Aston Martin, which is a shame. I just want Fernando to get his next win. I just want him to get his next win, and I'll be happy. But who knows? I think next year will be much of the same for them, probably. Maybe a little bit better in performance, but then we'll see what happens in 26. All right, McLaren. Oscar Piastri qualified 8th, finished 7th. Piastri ran an all right race. Nothing to write home about. Nothing major, nothing special, not terrible, mediocre. He kind of he was a bit inconspicuous. He did, he really tried to get past Verstappen. Really tried. There's actually a brilliant photo of the two of them coming down the strip. And listen, it wasn't a bad race per se from Piastri. He did get noted for a false start and get a 5-second penalty. And I actually, when they did the replay, I think I was focused on whatever was happening live because there was a battle happening at the same time that they did the replay, and I kind of missed the whether or not it was a false start. It obviously was. The amount of sensors and everything that are around there in the pits and cameras that can show you it being a false start. So it's a slam dunk penalty. Not the race I expected for Oscar. I always kind of expect Oscar to be a bit further up the pack, but Vegas is obviously a very tricky circuit. That car wasn't, the specification of the car didn't suit the track, and obviously they weren't allowed to use the rear wing that they had planned to use, the one that they used in Baku. They were also going to use in Vegas. It was that same type of track, and they obviously, Red Bull had kicked up a fuss about it, and they weren't allowed to use it. It was legal. The rear wing was legal, but they were like, listen, we'll play the game. We'll not do it. And could you say that cost Lando and Oscar? I mean, it did. The not having that wing definitely hampered their performance. But I mean, everybody struggled on track. Absolutely everybody. I don't think any driver felt 100% comfortable. So a decent few points for Oscar. Well done. His teammate Lando Norris, who qualified 6th, finished 6th and is out of the championship contention. The big question of whether Lando Norris would or would not win the championship has finally been answered. He cannot. He is officially mathematically out. Max Verstappen has won. Can I just say, in terms of the race, we'll go through the race quickly. Norris had an all right start. He he clung on to the back of the Ferraris and the back of Verstappen for as long as he could, and towards the end, he sort of became the pack leader for best of the rest, because even towards the end, when the Ferraris overtook Max and it was Max in P5, Lando in P6, there was still a 10-second gap between them, over 10-second gap between them. So Max was comfortable, he could chill, and Lando just sort of became that pack leader for the rest of the grid going down. He didn't really make much of a mark. Both McLarens, I will say, did struggle this weekend, but we knew that would be the case. The team was very open and honest that they would struggle this weekend, that the track wasn't a McLaren-suited track, that the car wouldn't suit that track, and that, you know, it was going to be a bit of a struggle. So I imagine they are pretty happy with the points that they've gotten. They didn't lose too much out to Ferrari in the constructors. We'll come on and talk about the constructor standings at the end, because that's the big sort of fight now. But the main bit I want to sort of touch on for Lando Norris is, can I just say, well done. Well done, because he went into this year, and that team went into this year not really believing that they could be in a fight for the Drivers' Championship. Norris has said himself, they've been like, how did it feel? And he's like, I don't, it's obviously felt amazing, but it was never something that I thought I'd be fighting for. And he got his first win this year. He's got multiple wins. He's got his first year winning a race. He's got 3 wins under his belt now. It's been a long time coming. He's had a great season. He has challenged and brought a fight to Max. And, you know, none of us thought that was possible coming into the year, especially after Bahrain. I was like, cancel the season. We're just going to get 2023 again. And Norris has really brought a fight to him. And he should be really proud. And in his post-race interviews, you can tell it's like his shoulders have just relaxed. He just seems so much more at peace and relaxed now, that the pressure of this championship fight is kind of over for him. He's now just got the fight for second, and that is where his focus should be. His fight for second against Charles Leclerc, and trying to retain that lead in the constructors to get McLaren their first constructors. Lando Norris has done a brilliant job this year, and I think the people that say otherwise, it's more of a personal thing than I would say his performance on track. I think Lando has done a brilliant job this year. I think he should be incredibly proud, and he should leave this season and think of it almost as a trial run. And he should go into 2025 with the notion of, I can really challenge, I can really fight, and I can potentially be winning a Drivers' Championship this year. And I think he is 100% in the mix for a Drivers' Championship. I genuinely do. I think he will be right up there with your Max Verstappen's, with your Ferrari. I think Lewis, I think Charles Leclerc, they will all be in that fight. It's going to be a very exciting year, but well done to Lando Norris on an incredible performance so far this year. And we still have 2 races left, and I'll be very intrigued to see what both the McLaren drivers actually can do over the next 2 races, and you know, whether or not they can keep that lead in the constructors, and whether Lando can come home second. Do you know what? For the year, for him to have won his first race, to then go and win another 2 races, to launch a championship bid, and potentially come home second in the championship is mighty. So well done, Lando Norris. You should be proud. Now, speaking of the Ferrari drivers, Carlos Sainz qualified 2nd, finished 3rd, and Charles Leclerc qualified 4th, finished 4th. Now, I'm kind of putting both these drivers together because the sort of end of the race, there is drama down at Ferrari, which we'll obviously talk about, but fantastic start for Charles Leclerc. Carlos Sainz, I think, was maybe a little bit too worried with what was going on. I think Carlos Sainz was maybe a bit too worried about the George Russell and the Pierre Gasly of it, that he maybe left the door a bit too open for Charles Leclerc just to glide on round the inside of turn 1 and jump 2 places. So fantastic from Charles Leclerc there. And Leclerc then just really launched into trying to get P1 from Russell and just completely cooked his tyres. And it got a little bit hairy-scary for him because he dropped back. They told him that he needed to manage his tyres. He dropped back significantly, got overtaken by Sainz, got overtaken by Verstappen. The tyres were completely gone on his car, and he had to dive into the pits. Same thing for Carlos Sainz, to be fair. He did obviously manage to get ahead, and then he was then trying to keep Max at bay, but also try and get a jump on Russell. Cooked his tyres as well. So both of them had tyre issues very early on. I think the medium tyre wasn't fully suitable for that track. And to be honest, the hard didn't do much better. You couldn't really get mad long runs on it that we've seen in quite a few other tracks. They pitted Sainz as well, and both the drivers came out very far behind. But the hard tyre did seem to favour them a little bit. They managed to get some brilliant overtaking done. Both the drivers, they were on form for quite a bit of that middle part of the race. Towards the end, there was a bit of a moment with Carlos Sainz that has since been clarified. They swapped the drivers. The team obviously decided that Leclerc was obviously running better than Sainz. They swapped the drivers. Sainz dove into the pits. Hamilton followed him, but then Sainz cut off the line, rejoined the track and kept going. Now, I thought that was going to be a slam dunk penalty because I genuinely thought Sainz had jumped the white line to get back onto the track. And there was never anything came back that it was noted or it was going to the stewards, and it was because he hadn't actually crossed the white line. So managed to save himself. We then got Sainz over the radio saying, you know, what happened? And they were like, we weren't ready for you. And Sainz's response is pretty apt when he basically just said, wake up, like, come on, this is stupid behaviour. And my God, it is very, very stupid behaviour. That man also begged for a couple of laps to be pitted, and he kind of wanted to be pitted a minimum of 2 laps earlier than he actually did pit him, and he really wanted to get a fresh set of tyres on, and the team just didn't listen to him. Pitted him 2 laps later, he came home 3rd. The simulations have kind of shown that had he pitted earlier, he could have been on for P2. It would have been a net P2, but unfortunately it just wasn't the case. What started off as quite a high race for both the drivers kind of got a little bit worrying midpoint, and then sort of got back to being a good race for them. And then the teammate drama became apparent. There had obviously been a discussion before the race with what would happen, the sort of agreements that were being made between the drivers, and then there was Charles Leclerc had pitted, and when he came out of the pits, Carlos had been told not to overtake him. What does Carlos do? Carlos overtakes him. Fair enough. And Charles came over the radio and said, maybe try Spanish next time. And at the end of the race, Charles Leclerc's engineer came over the radio and said, Charles, you know, you did your job. And Leclerc's reply was mental. He said, yeah, I did my job, but being nice F's me over all the effing time. It's not even being nice, it's just being respectful. I know I need to shut up, but at one point it's always the same. Like, the man imploded. He blew up, and I don't think he actually realised his radio was on, because during his little outburst, Fred Vasseur came over the radio and was like, Charles, trying to get him to like stop. And then Brian came back over the radio as race engineer and was like, you know, okay, good job. And Charles was like, yeah, my radio's still on, I'm sorry. So what I would pay to be in the Ferrari debrief. And I just don't know what goes on with Ferrari sometimes. And like a team like Ferrari should never be calling a driver into the pits and then at the very last minute be like, no, don't come in, cancel it, because they're not ready. Like, what are you doing? What are you actually doing? What do you mean you're not ready for your driver to come in? I just don't understand it. It absolutely baffles me. And it baffles me when a team like Aston Martin does it, or Alpine. Imagine, my brain cannot comprehend that Ferrari pull moves like this. I mean, I should be used to it. They've done this, I mean, it's not as bad as the Matteo Binotto years, but Jesus Christ. Like, come on. I'll tell you what, being a Ferrari fan is an absolute roller coaster, because see the highs, they're so high. You know, Carlos winning in Singapore last year, the 1-2 in Australia this year, Charles in Monaco, Charles in Monza, Charles in Austin, Carlos in Mexico. Like, the highs are so high, and the performances when they're good are so great from the team. I include the drivers in that as well, but see when it's the lows, it's all just stupid mistakes that are happening, and I'm kills me. We've got 2 races left and a sprint, and they're 24 points behind McLaren. 100% doable, but the next 2 tracks should be very suited to McLaren's car. So I think there's going to be a bit of work. I still believe that Ferrari can do it, even though sometimes I feel like they don't deserve it. But they could win. Pull it together, Ferrari. For the love of God. But my God, would I pay money to be sat in the Ferrari debrief room after this race, especially after hearing Leclerc's radio messages. Like, that man was pissed. Next up, Mercedes. Lewis Hamilton qualified P10, finished P2. Phenomenal drive from Lewis Hamilton. Absolutely incredible to be starting P10, working his way through the pack, maintaining a position, defending pretty well. Well done to Hamilton. So, absolutely smashed that. Absolutely smashed it. Through everyone else pitting, he kind of got up to the front of the pack and was actually leading the race after they pitted Russell. They pitted Hamilton and he came out way towards the back, and he came over the radio and he was like, how many positions have we lost here? Like, what have you done? And then was just absolutely flying on those hard tyres. Absolutely flying. The man was unstoppable. He was fastest lap, fastest lap, fastest lap, fastest lap. Like, it was incredible watching him just picking drivers off. This is literally what I said about Max Verstappen last week, but Hamilton literally started 10th, got to the front, got stuck way down the back of the pack, and then just fought his way through. So, well-deserved P2 for Hamilton. Absolutely incredible. I did think we would maybe get quite a spicy end to the race for the Mercedes boys, because as Lewis was sort of gaining on Russell, Lewis was told that he was under no instruction that he had to play any kind of team game, that the drivers were free to race. And I do love watching Lewis and George race, because they do race hard, but they're also pretty respectful. They don't want to cause any team damage, obviously, but I thought we might have quite a spicy ending, but he just never really managed to get fully onto the gearbox of Russell. Speaking of George Russell, qualified first, finished first. George Russell, I think, has probably had the best weekend in his Formula One career, and he has been consistently at the top / first in the majority of the sessions. In FP1 he was P2, FP2 he was P3, in FP3 he was P1, in Q1 he was P1, in Q2 he was P3, in Q3 he was P1, and he won the Grand Prix. So he's had a phenomenal weekend, he's been consistent, he's been at the top, and it's been incredible. I'm so happy that he's won another race this year, especially after being disqualified in Spa. So very, very happy for him. He had a brilliant jump off the line managing to retain the lead, and nobody could really catch him. He was just kind of running his own race the entire time. He had a consistent gap. He was building on the gap. Even when drivers managed to close it a little bit, he kept a good gap that nobody could really, I mean, apart from the very start when Charles Leclerc was really hammering him hard and almost lost the lead of the race. He managed to retain it. He kept his composure, kept it cool, and just kept going. So mighty drive from George Russell. Mercedes was quick this weekend, and what's quite funny is when you ask the drivers, when you ask the mechanics, when you ask the likes of Toto Wolff, nobody knows why. Not a single person can tell you why Mercedes was quick. And it's quite interesting. It's happened with Ferrari again this year. They were quick at one point, and nobody could really explain why they were so fast. Same thing for Mercedes this weekend. Nobody actually can explain to us why they're so quick. They're all just baffled by it. They deserve to celebrate because that was incredible from Mercedes. Absolutely incredible. The consistency this weekend has been great. Hamilton, the consistency from George has been great. The bounce back from Hamilton, incredible. Very, very well done. I do wonder what will happen in the next two races because there hasn't really been, it just seems to be like a stroke of luck that they seem to find a bit of performance in the car and they just have a great weekend. It's not like they've been consistent on a specific type of track and they've been great all through those types of tracks. Like it ebbs and flows for them. So excited to see what they can do in Qatar and Abu Dhabi. I think it is safe to say that they are finishing fourth in the championship. Aston Martin will not be catching them. Aston Martin is on 86 points, Mercedes on 425, and I don't think they'll be able to catch Red Bull, who are 555 ahead of them. So Mercedes is finishing comfortably fourth in the championship, and I don't think there will be mad movements in the drivers. They're currently 6th and 7th, Russell 6th, Hamilton 7th. There could be a little change of position there, but I don't really see it happening. So looks like that could be the finishing positions for them. What I will say is there's been a lot of question marks over George Russell and whether or not he's the right one to take on the team leader role at Mercedes with Kimi Antonelli replacing Hamilton. But I have to say, let's go, George. Let's go. I think he is going to be a great number one in that team, a great team leader. So exciting to see what George can do next year as the seasoned driver in that team. All right, our last two drivers, and we'll kick things off with Sergio Perez, who qualified 16th, started 15th, finished 10th. A couple of great wee battles for Perez out on track, and not the worst performance we've ever seen from Perez, but when does it end? Your teammates just won the championship, and you've just finished P10, and you are 8th in the championship. I'm genuinely curious as to, I feel like we say this every single session, but what is actually going to happen with Perez? In all seriousness, because honestly, it cannot continue. And Simon Lazenby on the Sky broadcast after the race asked the other presenters what their thoughts were. Karun Chandok, Danica Patrick, Jenson Button. And he said, what's your thoughts on Perez? Do you think this is his last season with Red Bull? And they all kind of said yes. They all said yes. They all said it is the best option for the team to dump Perez. I just think Perez has got some mighty balls on him. He's ballsy to be going in front of the media and just saying, I've got a contract, I'm going nowhere, blah, blah, blah. The performance on track is terrible. He's lost them so much money. He's losing them the championship. And Christian Horner said, they need Perez to be scoring points because they could regain second in the championship. I think first might be a little bit out of reach, but they could gain second. It's just not going to happen because I just don't understand. And I think Perez has got some bloody cheek standing up there in front of media and giving interviews and whatever and being so cocky and arrogant about his position in the team when his performance has been utter dog shit for the entire, maybe not the entire year, he had a pretty alright start, but for the majority of the year, utter dog shite. Where does he get off on it? I just don't understand it. And listen, I do believe that there is maybe an element of, similar to Ferrari, that the team aren't going to really say much to the media because they don't want to rock an already unsteady ship, let's be honest. Let's be honest, Red Bull has been a bit of a rocky ship since day dot. All the stuff with Christian Horner, and then the car not doing that well, Adrian Newey leaving, Jonathan Wheatley leaving. Like, it's been a bit of a woo-hoo-hoo roller coaster. So I do wonder if there is an element of let's not rock the ship anymore. But I mean, you can see what happened with Daniel, that they didn't really say anything, but it was just so obvious. I think they're playing it a bit better than they did with Daniel, that if they are going to drop him, we're not going to really know about it beforehand unless Helmut Marko lets slip. We all know how he loves a media quote. But I'm just so curious as to what they actually are all thinking in that team. And especially all of the mechanics and the pit crew and everything, and the people that work on Perez's side of the garage, knowing that he is going out there with the same machinery as Verstappen, and Verstappen is going and winning championships, and their driver is barely scraping points. Like, barely. At once in a blue moon's that man getting points. It must be a little bit depressing. It's depressing to watch. I just don't think that Red Bull can continue. And like, what's mad is they dumped Daniel Ricciardo. That decision came from Red Bull to dump Daniel Ricciardo due to his lack of performance. Call it what you want, the Liam Lawson of it all. Lack of performance. Liam Lawson was guaranteed to do however many races, yada, yada, yada. In all seriousness, do they generally think Perez is the right driver for that? See, do they actually? Because they can't. No, they don't. They can't do. Like, I just think it's mad that they are continuing to go along with this Perez nonsense when they have Yuki Tsunoda proving himself, fighting to get in a seat, and then they're just not even giving him a look in. I just find it so bizarre. And I'm just so, like, they can't bring him into 2025. They just can't. I refuse to believe that man will be sat. I will be shocked. Because if they take Perez into 25, they're not getting anywhere near a Constructors' Championship again. I'm really sorry. I do not believe it. It's just so boring. It's so frustrating having to talk about Perez like this every single time. Anyway, we'll see what happens. I think it's mental that team has ripped up contracts and dumped drivers for so much less than what Perez is doing now. Like, so much less. Gasly and Albon's performance when they were at that team was 10 times better than what Perez is producing now, and they got dropped from the team. I just think it's absolutely mental. What I will say for Perez, in amongst all of my bashing of Perez, he probably had the overtake of the race. Like, the overtake of the race. He came down the back straight and there was a V-carb and a Haas in front of him. I think it was Lawson and Magnussen. And he came down the strip, down the back straight. He had a beautiful slipstream. And going into turn 14, he went on the inside. The V-carb and the Haas were side by side. And Perez just late on the brakes, came down the inside. I don't think he realised that maybe both places were up for grabs. I think he was maybe hoping just for the one. How, again, like the Liam Lawson and Magnussen overtake at the beginning of the race, how all three of those drivers got through that with no contact, no issues, nobody ending up in the wall, I will have absolutely no idea. That was what I want from Perez. That overtake was the overtake of the race, potentially of the season. However, we have had some incredible overtakes. I think back to Alex Albon in Canada. Just brilliant work from Perez. This is what I want. Why can't we get this? But absolutely incredible work there for Perez. The rest of it, I don't want to talk about. But that overtake was a work of art. However, let's go and talk about his teammate, because there's actually something good to talk about there. Max Verstappen qualified 5th, finished 5th. Do you know what? It was an alright drive from Verstappen. He didn't really seem to be struggling out there. He kept his cool, kept his composure. Off he went. Didn't need to... It was quite funny because when Leclerc overtook him towards the end of the race, he'd put up none of it, like no fight at all. He put up no fight to retain that position. He had a 10-second gap on Norris. He was comfortably ahead. He knew if he kept that 10 seconds, he was winning the championship. Norris didn't look like he was going to be gaining on him. Why bother? Why put yourself under the stress of nabbing a couple of points extra when you're about to win the championship in a couple of laps? So fair play. I must say that it's a very well-deserved championship, and well-deserved in a very different way. Like 2023 was so dominant, but 24, when we came into 2024, it was a dominant car, and I think Max won the championship in those first few races where he built up such a gap in the points that when the car wasn't the fastest and wasn't the most dominant, it didn't really matter as much because nobody could really get close to him. And that's what we've seen. Norris couldn't actually get close to him to really put a lot more pressure than what was already put on. Yes, there was times when you could see pressure maybe getting to Max a little bit when he was making some crazy moves in Mexico or when the contact happened in Austria. But he's done an incredible job this year, an absolutely incredible job to maintain his lead in the points in a car that has been very difficult to drive, that maybe hasn't been as reliable, hasn't been as dominant, has been a bit more tricky. And he's had some incredible drives this year that prove that he is one of the greatest drivers. Martin Brundle said it in a piece that Sky did before the race about Max and about his sort of time in the sport and his championships. And Martin Brundle said, I think it's too early to call him one of the greats, but I do think he is. I think in the history books of Formula One, he will be popped down. He will be revered as one of the greatest drivers, with your Schumachers, with your Hamiltons, with your Sennas, with your Vettels. He will be in that. He has now won 4 consecutive championships that only the likes of Sebastian Vettel, Michael Schumacher, Lewis Hamilton have achieved. He is sitting there with some of the greats of this sport. He's had his moments of road rage. He's had his moments where he's been a bit off the pace. But one thing I will say that Max has brought this season that I don't think any other driver or team has is consistency. He is consistently hauling that car into the high points places. And it's absolutely brilliant watching him drive. He is an animal on track, an absolute beast on track. And it's just brilliant. A very well-deserved 4th championship for Max Verstappen. I think what people tend to hook themselves on is the moments of road rage where he's lost his cool or his composure. And people fixate on that. But that is 1 or 2 races out of what will be 24 this year. And in those 24 races, for the majority of them, minus the likes of Austria, minus the likes of Mexico, maybe the likes of Austin, he has been so consistent, and he's just dominated the sport. And another incredible year for him. A very well-deserved championship, but a very well-deserved in a different way. 2023 was deserved because he was just completely dominant. He was winning all the time. This year has been a different championship bid, and but no less greater, if that makes any sense. So well done, Max Verstappen. Absolutely incredible. And the last thing I will say again for Red Bull, Max Verstappen needs a new teammate, for the love of God. So that is everything from us from a Grand Prix that was chaotic, filled with carnage. Very, very enjoyable. We have 2 races left. We are off to Qatar next week and then Abu Dhabi the week after. And that's the end of the season. As I said, we'll be heading to Qatar next week for our final sprint race of the year. It is also the return of Formula 2 and F1 Academy, who will be doing their final 2 races in Qatar and Abu Dhabi. So we will see who will be crowned champion in those 2. But that is everything from us. We will see you very soon for our predictions for Qatar. Have a fabulous rest of your day. And we'll see you soon. Love ya. Bye.